Hello, it's Debbie Gilbert from the Business Awards show, and I am also the owner of the Best Business Women Awards. Today, I'm joined by Falguni Desai, who is a strategic business growth coach, and she's also on the judging panel of the Best Business Women Awards this year. So we're going to talk a bit about her business and all about judging awards and what the judges are going to be looking for. So welcome, Falguni.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Great to be here.
Thank you. So, Falguni, we always start with anybody who comes on this show by sort of discussing where you came from in business. Why do you run your own business now, and how long have you been doing it?
So, my background is law. I'm a solicitor and a chartered secretary, and I did that for 20 years. I started out in private practice, and then most of my career I was in-house. So I was in-house counsel and company secretary for 2 PLCs. And my last role was with a property company specializing in shopping centers and retail parks. I was there for 14 years, had a really good career there, but basically got burnt out. The corporate life doesn't stop. And so long hours, weekends, it was just, that's just the way it is. And I got to a point where I thought, I just don't have any time for myself. I'm exhausted all the time. It was affecting my health. And so I needed to go off and think about doing something else. So I left there. I took a break. I did a master's in corporate governance and business ethics, purely because I wasn't ready to go back to work. And after that master's, I decided that I didn't want to work full-time, and I was looking for a part-time role, which is when I came across the coaching. And it really appealed to me because, having worked in a large corporate, what I'm now doing is I'm putting a corporate structure into small and medium-sized businesses, because business owners aren't necessarily taught how to run a business. They're very good at their own specific expertise, whatever they do, but they haven't necessarily been taught how to run a business. And so once they start running or start the business, they realize that there are so many different elements to the business, and to grow it, you've got to work consistently on 5 or 6 areas, in addition to doing the day-to-day work that is generating income for them. And so, having done that in a large corporate, where all I had to do was go in and do my bit, everything else was set up for me. And for SMEs, until you start getting the cash flow, you put everything yourself. And then as the business starts to get better and you start generating more revenue, you can start delegating, outsourcing, employing people. Until then, people are spinning plates. And it's very, very hard. And so it really appealed to me that I could make a difference to people's lives, basically, because it is finding that balance of personal life and business life, because you actually enjoy what you're doing. And let's face it, most people will start a business for a lifestyle change. You've been an employee, you've done the long hours, you've done the commute, you've done all of that, and you start a business because you want to change most of the time. And so I started the business in 2017, and honestly, I can say I absolutely love it. I've met lots of great people. I've worked with, and I'm working with some lovely people, and I've made a difference to them and to their business.
You certainly have, Falguni. We met through a business networking group called Sisters Knock, and the first time I met you, I thought, goodness, this woman is so calm. She's so calm. She's so collected. You delivered a really excellent presentation on some of these areas you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I was really taken with your knowledge, your calm nature, the structure of what you talked about. A lot of it resonated with me, many years in business. And I thought, oh gosh, that was me many years ago, you know. because I think it's true. A lot of the women that come through the Best Business Women Awards have started a business out of a passion of
Yeah,
something that they loved.
yeah,
They didn't necessarily decide one day, oh, right, I'm going to run a business. They just decided, I don't want to work in a corporate environment anymore. And then they look at their skill set and think, what can they do? And that's certainly what I did. So
yes,
I think, you're a very analytical person. You're very calm. You're very detailed orientated. So that's what led me to invite you onto our judging panel for the Best Business Women Awards. Some awards you will find you can actually buy a ticket to be an award, to be a judge.
oh,
Yes, which I just find that I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, if I'm
mm,
honest. So with our panel, I sort of pride myself that actually the judging panel are all invited onto the panel. They give their time up to come and
yeah,
judge,
yeah,
which is amazing because it's not an easy job to do. And they come because they love working with businesses and they want to do something to sort of give back, really. So I was delighted when you said you'd come onto the panel, because I think it's great to have such a vast mix of business experience on a judging panel, people from different backgrounds. So you've got, the law background, the HR background, and the 6 years of business coaching, having seen, I would imagine, quite a lot of scenarios in business, and being
absolutely.
able to sort of understand figures and understand what makes a successful business. So what sort of things do you think you'll be looking for when you're looking at the award entries?
I'll be looking for, obviously how long they've been in business, what sort of structure they've got in place, which is key to running an efficient business, but also a sustainable business. Because, if you have sudden growth and you've dropped a ball in a couple of areas, you are going to start seeing issues. What their longer term vision is, where do they want to get this business to? Is the ultimate aim to sell it? In which case, how have they structured it so that they can sell it for the best value? Because a lot of business owners, their businesses are fully dependent on them. And so when they try and sell, they don't get the value that they think they should get, because the buyer is going to want them tied in for a couple of years because they've got all the knowledge. What sort of a culture they've got, if they've got employees, because different size of businesses that apply for the awards. And so really understanding how the culture, does it reflect the values and the beliefs of the business owner? Because it's a cliche, but without a team, there is no business.
No.
And if you've got the right people in the right roles, doing the right thing in the right way, you are going to be successful. Because if you look after your people, it's a no-brainer that the business will be successful. So
do you think a lot of business owners fail to think about training and looking after their staff?
Absolutely. And it's not because they don't want to. It's lack of time, lack of resource, and curveballs keep coming. As I'm sure when you first started, because there is always something to address when you're running the business. Always, and just because you've got 2 or 3 employees, unless they're trained, they're guided, they're supported, they're mentored, there's only up to a limit that you can leave them to their own devices. They need to be engaged. You need to keep them engaged. And how do you do that? And that's a full-time role, looking after people.
So you'll be using your coaching skills really to analyze the entries, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really excited because it's going to be a really interesting exercise for me, just looking out for some of these things. And I know that you have a proper structure of how to judge, which I'm sure will be really, really helpful. because so that you're not just kind of going here, there, and everywhere. But within that, it will be really good to see what people have achieved, how they've achieved it, and what the future aspirations are.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when people write award entries, they focus on achievement, achievement, achievement. Okay,
Yeah.
so we all know, obviously to win an award, you have to have achieved something.
Yes.
But actually, what I think the judges tend to be very interested in is how you've overcome the challenges and the problems.
Correct. Yeah.
And, there is no business that has a garden full of roses that are blooming and beautiful. It just doesn't exist. And we often see people paint unrealistic pictures of their business, and we call it fudging the judge, that you're trying to sort of cover over the cracks, that it all looks marvelous. And I would say that with people like yourselves on the judging panel, we have a few business coaches and business analysts, you will see through that very, very quickly. So I'm sure you'd much rather hear the true story, the grit behind it, than everything's fantastic and rosy.
Absolutely. You have to be realistic. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like that.
Well, it just becomes an unbelievable story. And this is what some of the feedback we get from the judges, because you're asked to give feedback on your top 3 entries in your category. And you're also asked sometimes for feedback on entries that particularly have stood out for the wrong reasons, because people will ask us for the feedback, and the wrong reasons tends to be that people don't paint an honest picture, they put unrealistic figures in, or they don't put any evidence in, or they sort of miss out information, because sometimes people do amazing things outside of their business. So it might be supporting a charity or a project.
Yeah.
They do it through the business, but it's outside of the day-to-day running of the business. And people need to include this, because when you're reading it, you'll think, oh, wow, this is a business that is successful, but also gives back. And that's interesting for the judges to know. So I think when you're reading an entry, you want to see it read a story, really, don't you?
Yes. And like you say, very much about, how did this business start? What were those challenges? And how have they managed to grow to where they are now?
Yeah.
But what were those roadblocks on the way?
Yeah.
And how did they overcome them?
Yeah.
And what's next?
And what's next? Because you want to know, well, it's almost like a bit of a page turner. What's the next chapter in this story?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Part of what we talk about on this show is we have so many people who come on from such a wide range of industries, but we always ask for you to share some business tips. And I mean, you're the ideal person to do that. So you talked earlier about the 5 areas that you look at as a coach. So could you elaborate a bit on that and talk about those sort of areas?
Sure. And so for any business, small, large, medium, doesn't matter, the 5 key areas are sales and marketing, operations, finance, admin, and people management. Okay. Those 5 areas are just a given. Okay. And so the business, whatever it is, an architect or a law firm, whatever it is, so the day-to-day client work is working in the business, which you've heard before, and then these 5 areas are working on the business. All right. And for the business to grow sustainably, all 5 areas have to be worked on consistently. There is absolutely no 2 ways about it, because if you haven't done marketing for 3 months, you're going to be behind. You're going to have to start from scratch. If your systems are a mess and you haven't looked at them for a while, you're running the business is going to be, chaotic. Finances, people sometimes gloss over numbers. Oh, do you have a cash flow focus? Oh, do you mean my bank statements? No. Do you have a cash flow forecast? and looking at those numbers regularly, because I've met, business owners who are actually scared to look at them.
Yeah.
And so finances, that's the key piece of the puzzle in your business. And if you don't know your numbers weekly, if not daily, you will run into problems.
Yeah.
And so all of these areas, what happens is people, of course, people are business savvy. They listen to podcasts, they listen, they go to courses, they read books. So they have the business knowledge. But the disconnect happens because all this business knowledge is not implemented consistently. It's all about the implementation. And they do implement it, but they implement it sporadically.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's because it's lack of planning. Oh yeah, I'll get to that. Oh yeah, I'll come back to the admin. Oh yeah, I'll just come back to the marketing. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'll come back to it, because something always happens, right? And so the key is to plan in all these areas. Break it down. When are you going to do this stuff on a day-to-day basis, and then just implement it. And so then it's manageable. Otherwise, for a lot of people, it becomes overwhelming. And it's natural that you become overwhelmed because stuff is just coming at you. And so then people will just focus on the day-to-day, which of course is priority because that's your bread and butter. But if you want to grow, and if you want to grow sustainably, you've got to work on all these areas. Otherwise, often the growth starts like this. It'll plateau. And if you don't do anything, it will start going down.
So at what point do people tend to call you in? Where are you finding that people are calling you in when it's dipping down, or do some people just contact you straight away and start working with you because they want to be on top of everything from the get-go?
So I work with businesses who've been in business sort of 4 or 5 years, because for a startup, a lot of things are not in place. They're still finding their feet. It's still very much, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing, right? 4 or 5 years in, there is a structure and they're doing well. They're starting to see those numbers go up, but it's kind of getting a little bit plateaued. And that's the time when they're thinking, okay, I need outside help now. And they have to realize it themselves. It's not for me to say, you need help. And when the business is dipping, they need some other intervention if it's really, going downhill, because that's not the time for me to come and talk to them about, how to sort of look at the future and how they want to, see this business grow, because by then they need to turn it around. So I work with businesses that are doing, they're doing well, but they want to do even better. Yeah.
So you'd work with them to look at how can we grow this business, grow it sustainably, make some changes.
Correct.
I've worked with a few business coaches over the 25 years that I've been in business. And I would say to anyone listening to this, don't think that you don't need somebody and that you know it all, because you don't. And actually sometimes just having that sort of secondary opinion, objective opinion, somebody that you can discuss ideas with, is so valuable, because working sort of on your own, or running a business and having staff, it can actually be quite lonely and quite isolating.
Absolutely. It is isolating, because you can't really speak to your employees. No. You can't really speak to your partner or spouse, because they'll understand or listen to you up to a point. You need an outside, objective perspective, and I'm not saying I know everything, because you're learning continuously. But my legal experience working in in-house and in private practice and now the coaching for six years, I've got solid experience, where I can spot the signs of where things can be moved and improved and turned around. And the analogy I use a lot is, you don't think twice about getting a personal trainer in a gym, okay? You don't need one, but you often want one. And so I always say, you don't need a business coach. You can carry on yourself, but you should want one.
Yeah.
Because just like a personal trainer, they're going to motivate you, they're going to guide you, they're going to give you new ideas, they're going to help you improve, and they're going to help you stay ahead, of the game, basically, right? Yeah. And so it shouldn't be seen as a weakness. And I think that is sometimes still a little bit of an issue.
I think there is a bit of a stigma. You're right. And I think people often say, oh God, I don't need a business coach, because I've obviously worked with businesses on their marketing. And often I'll spot things that I'll think, I think I actually need more help in this area or more help in that area. And you sometimes suggest to someone, often I work with people who are literally bursting with ideas. They've got so many that actually they need help concentrating it down and looking at which areas of the business they should be focusing on. Often people aren't really clear on their numbers. They don't fully understand cost of sale, net profit, gross profit. It's all quite basic stuff, but not everybody is aware of all of that. And so, you can actually end up pointing out to somebody, did you know you're actually losing money? And they're like, am I? Yeah. And, you'll say to them, well, maybe you should work with a business coach, because some areas of your business are profitable, some areas aren't. And they take it as a bit of an insult, I think, sometimes. Like, I don't need a business coach. But I always say, look, over the years, I've worked with a number of different coaches on different projects that I've done for my business. And it really has helped me along the way, massively. And I don't think my business would be where it is without that support. And I think it brings us on to talking about writing an award entry is actually a really good opportunity to review your business from all the different angles. And that in itself, that piece of work can help you identify where the weak spots are. Absolutely. And, from that, you might say, well, actually, maybe we should do some work with a business coach, bring somebody in. Because you can presumably work with people on a short-term or a long-term basis.
Yes. It's a monthly, rolling agreement, and I see them twice a month. And then every 3 months, we spend a whole day planning for the next 3 months on those 5-6 areas I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So as a minimum, they should do 6 months to start seeing the difference.
No, 6 months.
But once they start, they do carry on because it's a benefit and they're getting a return on their investment. And there's no sort of minimum, period that they're tied in for. And if they want to stop, they can just give me a month's notice and stop. But this is a continuous process because the business is evolving, they're evolving, the market changes, employees come and go, their business model might change. So something is always going on. And once they start, that's when they realize that actually doing the day-to-day, that's fine. But there's all this other stuff around it that has to be managed continuously and consistently. Yeah.
And sometimes that leads you to maybe employ a business manager or office manager, whatever you want to call them.
And so the aim of this coaching program from my side is, can this business be profitable? And can it run without the business owner if that's what they want? If that's what they want? Because at what point is there enough cash flow and the structure is such that they can now employ a managing director and they can just oversee the business, take a passive income and ultimately sell it. And often what happens is family businesses children don't want to take over the business, and so what happens? You know, you don't want a crisis where suddenly there's a big issue, something's happened, terrible's happened, and it's like, oh my God, now what are we going to do? And so thinking ahead, you know, of what the plans are 3 years down the line, 5 years, 10 years, you know, and then working back to break it down.
Yeah, and I think exit planning is always important. I was thinking about this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you have to think you're not going to live forever. And, you know, there might be other things you want to do in life. So I think having that exit plan in mind, and if you have got an exit strategy, you can include that in your award entry as well, because I think judges are always interested in all of this stuff. Yeah. So I think fundamentally, if you have a business, you do need some outside support of some kind. I believe that. I believe that it's very hard to steer a ship alone, even if you've got a great team of employees. I believe that you still need some external help because it's your third eye.
It really is. And sometimes, you know, I hear people say, oh, but I've got my accountant. You know, my accountant gives me business advice. It's not the same.
No, it's not, because they're going to advise you from a purely financial and tax planning aspects. I firmly believe that you need a third, I always call it a third eye, and having external support and external help makes such a massive difference. And we often see some of our winners coming through, and many of them have actually had that support over the years, and accredit a coach to their support. To their success, not support. So if you're listening to the podcast and you run a business and you're feeling like you're tearing your hair out a little bit, then maybe consider getting a coach and look into it. And we will put Falguni's details into the show notes as well. And I think, you know, an initial consultation with you costs nothing, presumably, just a conversation. So it's always worth investigating.
I mean, I invest a lot of time up front because people need to know, you know, what this is about, because I want to build a long-term relationship. So I'll have an initial 30-minute conversation about, you know, finding out what the business is, if we're a good fit, and if there's potential, and if we both see the value in having a second conversation. And if we do, I'll spend 2 hours with the business owner, and we will apply the model that I use to their business so they can see whether it makes sense for them or not.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, which then, you know, there'll be some new ideas come out of that. We'll figure out what their strengths are, what's working, what's not working, and then they can decide. The only thing I say to people, and it doesn't matter what sort of business they're on, be open-minded.
Yeah, and I think you have to be in business anyway. I don't think it's very easy to succeed in business and be closed-minded, because I get this with marketing. I know. I get this a lot when people say, oh yeah, but I've tried that and it doesn't work. Or, oh yeah, but sometimes what you've tried can be tried in a slightly different way. It's the same with award entries. You know, when people say to me, well, I've entered awards and I've never won anything. And often it's just because you've left out critical information, or you haven't entered the right categories for your business. There's loads of reasons. But I think with business, we have to stand up, dust ourselves off, and look for solutions rather than wading through treacle, which often...
That's it. And it's not easy. You know, it's not easy running a business.
No, especially at the
moment. It doesn't matter what size it is. You know?
I know. Well, Falguni, it's been great listening to your tips today, and we're delighted you're on the judging panel for 2023, and you know, we look forward to seeing you at the final in September. And as I said earlier, we'll put Falguni's details into the show notes. So thank you for joining us, and we wish you continued success with your business.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you.